welcome. In case you don't know me, I'm Aaron, one of the artistic directors here at the festival. And I'm so pleased to see you all come out on this afternoon when you could be, on the lake, but you're here. And this SkanFest U series is a way for us to deepen our appreciation of music in general, but also to prepare to hear some of the performances at the festival this year. We have had classes over the years on Mozart, on Beethoven, on folk music, on music and the visual arts. This year's course is called Music and Home. And that is designed to fit with one of our themes this year, which is called Searching for Home. And it's highlighting some music that connects with refugee communities here in central New York, including Syrian and Afghan communities. We have an amazing Syrian clarinetist coming very soon. We also have a young Afghan musician who's coming, and they're both writing pieces for the festival this year, which is very exciting. And I thought it would be an opportunity to look at music more broadly and how it connects with our own homes and our sense of home, but also how composers express their own sense of home within their music. Now that may seem a little abstract at first, but I'm going to make it as concrete as I possibly can. We're going to look into various musical traditions from around the world and how they express a local sense of place and home. And every composer, I think, has a way in their music of inhabiting the music as if it's a place. And so we're going to look into that today as well. You can see this image in front of you. That's actually Chopin at the piano. Here, this was the environment that he preferred for playing his own music, was in people's homes. He did not like to play in concert halls and for the public. He felt that one could hear more of the nuances in music in this kind of a place. And throughout history, the home has been important to music in various ways. It often facilitated social interaction. You can see that here, often interaction even between the sexes. You get a sense for that, the kind of conversations. And music of the 18th century even has a quality of dialogue about it, of the instruments talking to each other. And that's something that fits with here. Later in the 19th century, the early 20th century, there's a little bit more of a contemplative quality to music. We listen to it, it soothes us, it takes us outside of ourselves. And so here you have a little bit of a less social quality and a little bit more of a reflective kind of listening. But that's also taking place in the home. Now, the word home, I've already said it 20 times, but we haven't really defined it. And in fact, it's not an easy thing to define because it has so many different meanings. I can just call upon the Merriam-Webster dictionary to help us out. And it has 6 different meanings or categories of what home can mean. And we can relate to these, right? The easiest is it's just where we live, right? It's your house. But more important than that, I think, and the emotional resonance to the word home comes through the way it reflects our family or a social unit or the people that inhabit the place, right? And the third definition, it's kind of a familiar environment or one that, home is where the heart is. It's where we feel most comfortable, where we feel connected, and where our bonds are with our family. We also use it as a place of origin, right? Our hometown. We all have our hometown. Some of you have the hometown of Skaneateles. I don't. My hometown is Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And right away we can connect our hometown and our place of origin with the music that we heard as children, right, in those places. In Milwaukee, German polka music was big. So that has a special resonance for me. Do I love German polka music? Well, I've never programmed it at the festival, but I do have this quality of memory associated with it because I grew up hearing it at weddings and in various places. So home has all these different definitions, and you might reflect for a moment on what home means to each of you. But what I'd like to ask you is what music you associate with home. I can share my own background. You know, as growing up as a child, my parents had a record collection. That dates me a little bit. But as soon as I figured out how to work it, I fixated on my father's love for classical symphonies. He had a record of Mozart Symphony No. 29. I played that so many times, so many times. And that, for me, represents my earliest memories of home. My mother, on the other hand, was a fan of the Swedish pop group ABBA. So those are the other sounds I was hearing, right? And so I associate those with my childhood home. I wonder if any of you would be willing to share what music you associate with home, whether it's your childhood sense of home or your current sense of home, what music you might listen to when you're home. Does anybody? Show tunes. So you're thinking Broadway, American Songbook? So your mother played them when you were young? Yeah, and so that music, it resonates with you somehow, makes you feel comfortable, like this is the place I live, this is where I'm from. Yeah, anyone else have a certain music that you carry with you? Yes?
When my granddaughter visits from Maryland, we have a CD collection, and we have a CD of all Christmas music. The first thing she does is run in the house and play Feliz Navidad.
Feliz Navidad. It's the sign that you're home, right? That's the music. Yeah. Yeah, and Feliz Navidad isn't necessarily, you know, your folk music, but it's the music you played at home, and so that resonates there. And that's so interesting. Yes, Elizabeth.
I grew up in Syracuse, and my grandparents immigrated from Lebanon at the turn of the century.
I'm sorry, from where?
Lebanon.
From Lebanon.
And my mother had quite a catalog of Arabic music that she played on the piano.
Arabic music.
So
Wow.
much of the Syrian influence.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to get into that 2 weeks from today in particular. So I hope we can share more then. But thank you. So music from Lebanon, Arabic music. Amazing that even just in these few examples, we all have so many different musical pathways that we associate with home. I'd like to start, as the first piece that we're going to hear today, a work which is actually literally called Home. And it was performed here at the Skaneateles Festival 2 years ago by the Miro String Quartet. It's by the American composer Kevin Putz. And before I tell you about the piece, it was a big hit, by the way, when they played it, and so it's kind of stuck with me. I'd like to just play the opening couple of minutes for you. And before I tell you more about why the piece is called Home and what it represents, I just want you to reflect on what about these sounds might make one feel a sense of home. Okay, so that's the first couple of minutes of a string quartet called Home. And Kevin Putz writes, the work begins in what is essentially C major, which I intended as a sonic representation of home. I wonder if anyone has a reaction to why this music might feel like home. Is there anything about it? Yes.
It sounds warm and peaceful
Yes.
and soothing,
Yeah.
which aren't characteristics of everybody's home, but it's
Yeah.
kind of an ideal of home.
Yes, it is. Yes, the soothing quality. It's peaceful. It's ebbing in a regular way. Yeah, Coco, you.
Well, it's C major and plus piano,
Mm-hmm.
home key is C.
Yes.
So the first thing you ever play.
Your home key is C on piano. It's sort of symbolic for those of us who play piano. C major has a certain sound. Well, on stringed instruments, C major also has a certain sound. C is the lowest open string on the cello, which is the lowest instrument within the quartet. Kevin did something unusual for this entire piece. Actually, it makes the piece a little more difficult, but also very special. He asked the string players to retune their instruments so that instead of having the cello play, for example, oh, Julie's right here, so she can play the open strings on the cello. There's C major, and yeah, I'm playing the next two. Right, so the upper strings, D and A, Kevin asks the cello to retune the instrument. So you actually have to take the peg and move the strings so that instead of, this, you have the notes of C major. And he asks the other instruments to retune as well. And so what you end up having is these warm open strings representing C major in the piece. So he really enhanced the piece by doing that and gives that feeling of stability. Any other thoughts on why it?
I was going to say within each phrase it resolves itself, so you never feel like you're too far away from the middle C.
Yeah.
Even when it shifts to what was A minor, it never stayed too far away from A.
That's right.
So it felt like it was coming back to starting.
Yes, absolutely. You hit upon something really central to music here that we're going to come back to in this class, which is that home can be a harmony, a place of stability where the music either stays for a while, as it does in this case, or departs from and comes back to. Actually, musicians use the term home key. It's in the home key could be any key, but it's the key where you start in. And for 99% of music before 1900, it comes back to the same key at the end. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, composers could have ended pieces in any key they wanted to. But for some reason, they always come back, almost always, to the key they started in. And so that's really a wonderful sonic representation of home, and one that many composers are going to use throughout time. Now, a little bit more about the piece you just heard. Kevin Putz was inspired to write this piece by the refugee crisis in Europe, and in particular, some pretty horrific stories of people trying to reach Europe by boat. A lot of people died that way. Anyways, he explained that the work begins in C major in an idyllic atmosphere, and then after several minutes, it sets out in search of unfamiliar harmonic terrain. And then he explains how he wrote the piece, and he hoped that the piece would find a new place of residence harmonically at the end of the quartet. We're not going to listen to that today, but I do want to play a little bit of the middle of the quartet where it departs from C major and goes somewhere else, just as a way of contrasting what you just heard. So play a little bit of that for you. So you can see that the work is less stable now, right? It's searching, it's going through different keys and finding its way. Again, it's a very powerful representation of what it means to be at home and then leave home and go somewhere else. And in the case of refugees, that's, takes on a completely different meaning than us setting out for our day's work or on a journey somewhere. So again, that work was performed on this stage in 2022 by the Miro Quartet. They've since recorded it, and I'm playing their recording for you now. And it's just a starting point for us. But as I've alluded to, Kevin is by no means the first composer to treat the home key as a place where you start and then depart from. I wanted to start with a very early example of this by Johann Sebastian Bach. Now, Bach did not write many pieces with a storyline, but he did write this piece when he was a teenager. The story is that his older brother got a job in Sweden. He was from a family of musicians. His brother got a job as oboist in a Swedish army band. Okay, this is in 1704, right? So Bach is 18, 19 years old. And he decided to write a piece about his brother, which is called, and it's sort of in Italian and German here, but the title of the piece is Capriccio on the Departure of a Beloved Brother. Okay? And each movement has a different aspect of the story. The first one here in front of you, you can see, it says in German, among a group of friends, the friends try to explain to the brother why he should not go on this trip, why he should stay at home, essentially. Okay? So this is the first movement, and it's a kind of early evocation of home among people you love. So I'll play just a little bit of that for you. We can compare it to the music you just heard. So this is chapter 1, so to speak. The key is in B flat major, and it starts in B flat major, it ends in B flat major, and there's not much departure from it. So it's very similar to Kevin Putz's idea. The music is comfortable, it stays where it enjoys itself, it appears happy. Maybe there's a little sadness because the brother may be leaving. But it's very peaceful and comfortable. In the next movement, Bach says in German, a representation of the dangers that await the brother if he should leave. Here's a little bit of that. Would anyone reflect on what's different between those two musics? How does this one compare to the first movement? Yes, it is, right? It's not really in a major key. It's a little bit more in the minor.
More dissonance.
A lot of dissonance, yes. In fact, you can see, if you can see, I shouldn't take for granted that you can see up here, but anyways, there are lots of what we call in music accidentals, sharps, flats, naturals, that show that the music is not really in the home key. It keeps departing from it and going different places. It never feels settled. So again, harmony can be very powerful this way in music. Either it can establish a feeling of home or departing from it. Now, I could give you many examples from throughout music that do this, and in a moment we'll have some music for cello and piano. I'll show you in more detail. But just one more example, this one by Mozart. In last year's class, we heard a little bit of this piece in a different context. This is a piano sonata in G major. It starts in G major, and it's the home key, and it feels relatively comfortable. Sounds like this. G major. That's our home harmony. Now, a little bit later, Mozart departs from the key. Now, composers generally in the 18th and 19th centuries, they started in what's called the home key, or the tonic, is the official musical name for it, T-O-N-I-C, tonic, as in fundamental tone. It usually goes to another key at the end of the first half, and then there's a section in the middle, this is in what's called sonata form, where the composer explores some other keys. In this particular movement, there's a very short middle section, and whereas the first part was in G major, right, you heard, in the middle of the keyboard, right here, now Mozart changes to the high part of the keyboard, and he's in a faraway key, well, not so far away, but it's different, in D major. So that's almost like another place. Now, there's a little bit of excitement that's going to generate because as listeners, we start to feel that we're headed back toward the home key. So listen with me. And if you don't know, if you haven't studied music or don't know harmony, don't worry. Just think about, where do you feel comfortable again? Where does the music sound familiar? And that's Mozart giving you a cue about where he's going. So here he goes back home. And as listeners, we feel, oh, I know that place. I've been there before, right? That's our home key. That's our home melody. And so whereas Mozart went up to D major and enjoyed that for a while or explored it, then there's this kind of feeling, you can hear the pulsating notes, that there's an anticipation that we might be getting back where we're comfortable again, which is here at the home melody here. So composers work through ideas like this on a very large scale. Beethoven is somebody who does this remarkably well. And maybe he's the first composer that I can think of who had a slightly more developed sense of home, whereas he departs from the home key, and when he gets back to it, he recognizes that, yes, it's the home key, and we're back where we were before, but he usually changes something about the return. He'll change the dynamic from, if it starts in piano, maybe it'll be in forte when he comes back home. Or maybe he'll add a different kind of accompaniment or figuration to show where you've been. Recognizing that you've changed from where you started the piece, even when you come back to the home key, you feel a little bit different. So I'd like to walk you through the first movement of Beethoven's Cello Sonata in A major, and I'm very fortunate to have my partner here, cellist Julia Bruskin, co-artistic director, who is willing to join us today. Opus 69 is one of Beethoven's greatest works for the instrument. It's on a pretty large scale. And Beethoven does something here which goes beyond just the feeling of a home key. He actually treats the opening music kind of like a person or a character. One way composers can do this is by using a theme that comes back throughout the piece in different ways. And this movement has a very clear theme, which I'd like to ask Julie to play for us, just the opening notes. Unusually for a cello sonata, the cello begins all by itself. There's no piano accompaniment. So it's the clearest representation of one individual. The theme is very distinctive because it starts with the opening interval of a fifth. Could you sing that? If you can sing a little bit, sing with me. La, la. Okay, keep that in your ear. That's going to be like the character who sets out from the home key, which is A major in this case, and is going to go somewhere else. Now, originally, the theme feels very comfortable, just easygoing, but the piano adds a new dimension to the theme. It seems to be yearning to go somewhere else. And so it's like you're at home and you're comfortable at home, but then you have this feeling like, maybe I want to go somewhere. So let me play that for you. Go ahead. Come back to the theme. This time it's in the piano part. And again, we want to go somewhere. So far in the piece, we have this feeling of stability, peacefulness at home, and a little bit of yearning to go somewhere else. But now we're actually going to go somewhere else. And it's a very strong contrast. All of a sudden, we're out in the world where things are dangerous, challenging. Beethoven wrote in the manuscript of this piece, which ends very happily and is in general one of his most sunny pieces. He wrote in the manuscript in Latin, he wrote, "Inter lacrimae et luctus," or "amid sorrow and tears," which is autobiographical. He did not mean that to go into the printed music. It was just something he wrote. It's what he was feeling, I guess, at that moment. Now, he had lots of difficulties in his life, which I won't get into. Health problems, family difficulties, money problems, all kinds of stuff was going on in his life at this time. So the theme, which we have in our ear, he's going to keep the same theme, but it's going to go into a different key and in a very different character. Okay, so this theme, here's what he does next with that theme. Then we go back home to where we started. Come again. I wanted to highlight just at the end where you heard the cello play, and then the piano, and then that's our original theme that's coming back. So it's a little bit like a protagonist that leaves home, goes through the series of adventures. We have a theme which is very stormy and expresses danger or difficulty. Then we have a very peaceful theme, which is not home, it's somewhere else in E major. Then there's this sort of triumphant, proud theme to close with, and then our home theme comes back. And so Beethoven makes a wonderful analogy to a character setting out from home and going to different places. Now, I'd like to play the middle section of the piece for you, which goes into yet more different kinds of adventures. And what I'd like you to do is listen for when that original theme comes back again, and I've put it on the board here. I mentioned earlier that one thing that Beethoven does with his themes is that when they come back, he changes something about them. Like you're the same person, but because of your life experiences, the music is a little bit different somehow. In this particular case, what he does, the theme comes back in the cello. It's exactly the same notes we heard at the very beginning. Could you play it one more time? Same theme. Yeah. But this time, beautiful. This time, the piano part has an accompaniment, which it didn't have originally. And these triplets, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, they come from the middle section of the piece, which we're about to play for you. In other words, when you come back home, you bring whatever you went through, right? Those experiences you take with you for the next chapter, the next day. And Beethoven does that beautifully here. So we'd like to play that section for you if we have time. Do we have time? I think we have time. We'll play that. Starting from the development. Why don't we do that closing theme where we have that interval, come back, and we'll go into the middle section and then back home. Now, when you hear the melody, if you feel like, oh, maybe the music is back home, feel free to raise your hand if you feel that moment, like you feel comfortable. Now, Beethoven can trick you, too, so don't feel bad if you raise your hand at the wrong spot, because sometimes he does that, but you're welcome to do it if you feel it. Now, I didn't turn my head. Oh, thank you. I didn't turn my head to see if anyone raised their hands. But did you feel a moment where the music was all of a sudden comfortable again and felt at ease and peaceful? That's something you can listen for in music in general. Even if you're not a trained musician or you don't have perfect pitch like my wife does. I don't. You can't tell what key you're in. You can still feel where the music has that sense of ease and returning to something that you've heard before. That's one of the most joyful things in listening to music, I think, is just recognizing where you've heard something before. So if you can develop that instinct when you're listening, you'll go a long way in appreciating classical music, certainly. One more spot before we invite our next guest up. And that's at the end of this movement. I just wanted to play the coda. Beethoven comes back to the home theme, and this time it's in the key of D major, which is close to A major, but not quite our home key. It sounds like this. In other words, it's almost home, but it's not quite home. And in this last section, Beethoven is going to move from that place, and he's going to wander through some strange harmonic terrain, and he's going to come out, and there is the home key of A major. And it's just the most joyful place and most peaceful place. So we'll end with this.
Together without the stops, come back tomorrow night.
I was going to say the same thing. So a little preview there. And Beethoven is the master of using the key expressively, the home key, departing from it and coming back to it again. Now, we're going to go forward now into the 19th century and into the early 20th century. One of the touchstone composers who really developed a sense of home in his music in the 19th century was Frédéric Chopin. We're going to look more at his music next week when we have a little bit more time, and we're going to connect his ideas to music by Antonin Dvorak that we'll hear next week, Dvorak's American Quartet, and even, maybe unlikely as it might seem, to Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, which I'll be playing this Saturday in the orchestra concert. We'll do that next week. But Chopin was influential because he was able to take the sounds of his home country, namely Poland, and combine them with some very personal thoughts and feelings in his music and unite the sense of place, his home culture, folk culture, with his individual perspective. And later composers really admired Chopin for his ability to do just that. Chopin, he left Poland when he was 19 years old. He's pictured here in the year that he left. And he wanted to go abroad and make a career as a concert performer. So he departed and he went to Vienna. And immediately upon leaving, he heard news that there had been an uprising back in Poland that was put down very brutally by the occupying Russian forces. Poland had been partitioned at that point, and the part Chopin was from was under Russian control. Well, the Polish people had some autonomy, but then after this uprising, which hit Chopin very strongly, Russia kind of cracked down and was less tolerant. And so that was a difficult event. Chopin wasn't sure, should he go back to Poland and try to help in the uprising? he realized that he really wasn't the kind of person to want to fight. He suffered from asthma. He had tuberculosis when he was a child, so he was really not in great health, wasn't able to do that. So he wrote back to his family that in Vienna, where he was playing nothing but mazurkas. He couldn't stop playing mazurkas. This is a Polish dance form, which I'll go into a little bit more next week, again, when we have more time. But that idea of taking a national or local folk dance and incorporating it with the individual character of your personal thoughts or feelings was something Chopin brought into music. Now, our last composer we'll hear today is a Spanish composer, Isaac Albéniz. He was from Barcelona, and he, like Chopin, as a young man, wanted to set out and tour the world, which he did. When he was a teenager, he played piano all over the world. He went to Puerto Rico, he went to South America, he went to North America. Anyways, he eventually settled back in Spain at a time when the Spanish people were asking themselves, what is our cultural identity? How do we relate to Europe? And Albéniz, in his music, takes some musical ideas which are associated with Spanish folk music and makes them his own. He studied with a teacher in Spain, Felipe Perdurel, who was one of the first to collect authentic Spanish folk melodies, to catalog them, and then to identify what are the traits in the music that make them unique. And so what Albéniz did is he started to write Spanish pieces which were deliberately trying to evoke his homeland of Spain. He entitled them based on different very specific locations within Spain, and the one we're going to be fortunate enough to hear now is Granada, which is in the south of Spain, and very famously, Granada is where there's an amazing palace. Has anyone been there, called the Alhambra? Yeah, okay, a few of you have been there. It's an amazing palace. It was built when the southern part of Spain, Andalusia, was occupied by Arab people from North Africa during the 8th, 9th, 10th centuries, before Ferdinand and Isabella kind of reconquered the whole Spanish peninsula. And a lot of the architecture is surviving to this day. Well, Albéniz was fascinated with this place, and it's very iconic and associated with Granada. And he writes a piece called Granada, part of his Suite Espagnole, or Spanish suite. And to identify the place, he gives it a subtitle, a serenata, a serenade. So you can kind of imagine, someone singing at the foot of the Alhambra Palace in Granada, singing a Spanish song. We have the song very clearly in the tenor voice, where the male tenor voice sings, right here. And then in the right hand, we have a strummed instrument. What Spanish instrument do you strum with your fingers? Not this one. The guitar, yes. So we have an imitation here of the guitar. Now, this piece was originally for piano, but it works so beautifully on harp, where we're going to hear it in a moment. One of the ways that Albéniz identifies it as Spanish is he uses a Spanish ornament, which comes out of Spanish singing. You're going to hear this figure a lot. So you can hear that right at the beginning. That's very common in Spanish music. And so the combination of the guitar and this folk idiom here is really going to give the piece its identity, especially in the outer sections. In the middle section, and actually to my ears, sounds a lot like Chopin and Chopin's music. It has a more melancholy and a more personal kind of sound to it. We'll see if you agree or not. I'm very happy to introduce to you one of our great performers here at the festival, the harpist BRIDGET KIBBEY. She's playing both tomorrow at the matinee and in the evening, as well as the Ginastera Harp Concerto on Saturday. If you've never heard the Harp Concerto, I really encourage you to come. It's amazing, and BRIDGET is a great interpreter of it. Welcome, BRIDGET.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here.
Now, I mentioned earlier that this piece is not originally for harp. And I'm guessing this is not the first piece you've played that was not originally for harp.
Correct. But I was so enamored by what you said so beautifully and articulately about the Spanish culture and also that kind of Arabic influence into this piece. I had to try it on the harp. And I felt like the harp is basically like a massive guitar when you think about it. So there you go.
That's a great image. Yes, it's even bigger and broader. Yeah. Any like what are you thinking about or feeling when you play this music?
Well, I have to say my favorite range of the harp is the cello range, which is the tenor, and I love that melodic voice coming in at that range of the harp that I think is the most special sound on our instrument, and so I love to just play with my left hand to be that crooner and singer with that line, so I kind of enjoy indulging in that for sure.
Well, thank you for playing it for us
course.
today. Thank you so much, Bridget. It's such a pleasure to have you to play. I know that we're out of time, and I don't want to delay our wine reception too much longer. But if any of you have any questions about today's material or questions for Bridget, if she's willing, we'd love to take those now. I never know whether it's good or bad if no one asks any questions. Well, we'll continue to explore next week what home means in music. You have a couple ideas of it today, both a home key or a home harmony, Mozart, Beethoven, Bach, Kevin Putz. but also how a composer can evoke their homeland or their place of origin, as Albanese did in this beautiful piece, which Bridget played for you. You can hear that tomorrow at the matinee concert at 1:00 p.m. She's playing that, and as well as a bunch of other music, and she's playing music by Debussy in the evening as well. So we hope to see you at one of those concerts. Thank you for coming today, and I hope to see you in a moment for some wine.